NBA Jam was arguably the most popular arcade video game of all time. With around 20,000 units sold, NBA Jam managed to gross about $2 billion in revenue, maybe not the highest of all time, but still extremely impressive. If you look at just about any arcade popularity chart from 1993, you will see NBA Jam up at the top. And naturally, this was a huge boon for the NBA, which was now reaching out to audiences it would have never reached before. Midway, the company that created the game, followed up with NBA Jam Tournament Edition in spring 1994. At the same time, Midway worked with Acclaim to put out a whole ton of home console versions. Tournament Edition itself came to home consoles in early 1995 and was a smash hit. And that's when the music stopped. We never got another good NBA Jam again. Midway and Acclaim split up, and it's really kind of hard to figure out what happened. So let's go take a look at it and see what it is that we know, starting with the easy stuff. Okay, first off, it's not like NBA Jam simply went away or that the people in charge just gave up on the concept, but they did seem to take a year off, which seems like an eternity in the world of arcade games. There was no follow-up to NBA Jam Tournament Edition in the arcades in 1995. Well, I don't know the full story behind that, to be honest. Now, based on the rumors that I've read, it seems that Midway just didn't have any new ideas, which I think is crazy. I mean, I've heard rumors that they wanted to include things like alley-oop passes and instant replays as early as the first version of NBA Jam, but they didn't have the time to make it work. Now, they had created a franchise worth billions of dollars by late 1994, but they couldn't figure out how to make gradual and small changes like that. It blows my mind. Anyway, despite the lack of new arcade games, the home console NBA Jam scene was booming. Acclaim contracted with UK-based Iguana Entertainment to create the home console ports. In fact, Acclaim made so much money off its ports of NBA Jam and Mortal Kombat that it bought Iguana Entertainment in 1995 and turned it into Acclaim Studios. Now, the truth is that not all of the home ports of these games were really all that good. Some arguably had better controls than the arcade versions. And it's true that they weren't going to easily match the visuals and audio of the arcade version at home. But seriously, some of these ports could have been a lot better. Though the money was rolling in, I really get the feeling based on what I've read that Midway might have not really been happy with what Acclaim was doing, surprise, surprise. Meanwhile, as many video game history buffs already know, Acclaim didn't exactly have a reputation for making high quality games. It wasn't exactly a match made in heaven. The first sign that there was a problem came when College Slam was released in early 1996. This was a direct-to-console release and never came out in the arcades. Now, the concept here is actually pretty good. You've got 44 teams instead of 27, and they represent a much larger segment of the American population than the NBA. But all the players are anonymous. There aren't even fake names. The gameplay is identical to the home ports of NBA Jam Tournament Edition, except it looks and sounds worse. Now, I do want to be nice to College Slam. You see, back when I was in middle school, my best friend had a Sega Genesis and owned College Slam, and we used to play it all the time. However, when I go back and play it now, it's really, really bad. This is the best version of College Slam for the Sega Saturn. It really is a chore to play. Even though the game consists of two 5-minute halves, it took me over 20 minutes to play a single game. It feels sluggish. Your computer teammate is an idiot. And worst of all, it has the same camera angle problems that every single Acclaim version of NBA Jam and NBA Jam Tournament Edition had. Okay, so let's look into that a little bit. Now, I know there's a bunch of discussion online about what the best home port of NBA Jam Tournament Edition was. Frankly, I still think it's a Sega Genesis version, and that's because of the camera angles. Look at how the arcade version of the game worked. Notice that the camera always seems to be just to the right place no matter where I am on the court. The Sega Genesis version is actually similar. It's great if you're a gamer. But the heralded 32X version seems to have a really slow camera. The same is true for the Sega Saturn version of the game. And the PlayStation version has the same problem. Now, others have noted that the PlayStation version has a ridiculously stupid AI, which is correct. The same is also true of the Sega Saturn version. And the Saturn version just feels so slow, it's like it takes an eternity just to play a single quarter. Well, the same problem exists with College Slam on the Saturn. It feels like a chore to play. Anyway, I bring up College Slam because that was kind of a sign of where things were going to go with Acclaim. But what I really don't understand is why in the world Midway wasn't creating something. I mean, College Slam honestly was just a reskin of NBA Jam with a few changed colors and slightly different sounds. So where was the creativity? Well, sometime in 1996, the breakup took place. I've looked through video game magazines and even coin-operated arcade machine magazines, but I'm still not entirely sure what happened between Midway and Acclaim. But I do know that NBA Jam, the name, went to Acclaim for some reason or other. See, the NBA Jam name originally belonged to the NBA. In fact, the NBA wanted Midway to call NBA Jam by the name NBA Jam Session. That fits in with the NBA Jam Session that was at the 1993 NBA All-Star Game, which was only a month or so before the first arcade game was released. In fact, there are apparently references to the name NBA Jam Session in the original NBA Jam source code. Anyway, it was the NBA that had allowed Midway to use the name NBA Jam, and allegedly Midway was out of ideas for new games. Either that or the NBA liked what it heard from Acclaim better, and so the name went to Acclaim. Well, that's where the competition started. You see, NBA Jam Extreme, which was Acclaim's game, came out at the same time as NBA Hang Time, which was the Midway game, and nobody really knew what the real NBA Jam sequel was. Well, in retrospect, of course, it's easy to figure this out. NBA Jam Extreme was an awful early 3D game. The controls are horrible, it's impossible to know where you are, the camera angles are awful, the whole game is just bad. I seriously can't find anything good to say about this one. But what you have to realize is that the 3D perspectives in sports games were all the rage back in 1996. We'll take a look at the NBA Live series, for example. NBA Live used this 3D engine with a camera angle that kept changing. Every console version has something similar to this one. And if you play it today, you'll notice that you always feel kind of lost. The camera angles are not helpful at all. Now, I suspect that Acclaim might have used the promise of a 3D perspective like this to convince the NBA to give it the NBA Jam name. But sadly, the result was abysmal. By the way, it was around this time that I really lost my interest in modern video games. I was still in middle school and I really didn't like the 3D trend. I guess I've always been a 2D gamer at heart. Meanwhile, Midway came out with NBA Hang Time, which many people think is the game NBA Jam should have been. This game is a lot better than NBA Jam Extreme. The alley-oop system is absolutely fantastic. However, the arcade game seems to use the alley-oop a little too often, and John Stockton shouldn't be jumping up for the alley-oop. I read an interview once with some of the creators of NBA Jam a while back. It's from, I think, the mid-90s. They said that part of the idea behind the game was to make sure the players still played like themselves despite all the wackiness of the game. So someone like, say, John Stockton might be really good at stealing the ball, but couldn't dunk, something like that. But apparently they threw that out the window with NBA Hang Time. Anyway, as much fun as this game is to play, I still think NBA Jam Tournament Edition is better. For one thing, NBA Hang Time looks a little bit dark. The players are larger, which I guess is nice, but it can be hard to get the perspective right, and the sounds aren't quite as good as they should be. Anyway, NBA Hang Time won that arcade war, but that's just because NBA Jam Extreme was an unplayable mess. Acclaim came out with a new shovelware port every year. I guess the company hoped that the series would magically become good again, despite the fact that they were clearly not investing much time or attention into it. None of them came out in arcades, at least not that I'm aware of. Midway, meanwhile, had one last gasp with NBA Showtime. I actually remember playing this one in the arcade and being really underwhelmed. I mean, the presentation is fantastic. It looks like an old NBC broadcast, but the sound is pretty bad. The controls aren't quite as smooth and the game is kind of slow. And the players are really over-exaggerated with way too many muscles. Plus, the instant replay system seems broken to me. Sometimes it shows instant replays of plays that just aren't spectacular. Other times, the camera angle is just awful. And then you've got the worst part of this game, the fouls. If you shove players in NBA Showtime, you'll hear a ref's whistle. Do it enough and the other team will shoot a free throw. That's right, they put foul shots in this game. It's ridiculous. Whatever happened to NBA Jam? Anyway, I guess what I'm saying here is that Acclaim wasn't the only company that was making garbage. In the end, the NBA Jam phenomenon faded away. Sure, you've got games like NBA Jam on Fire Edition, and I really like the NBA Legends hack someone made a few years ago. But the gameplay is a little bit more complicated. It's not as simple and easy as the old version. And the most obvious problem, of course, is that every version after NBA Showtime has been made for the home consoles. It's like watching Disney movies that were made for video. You know it's not going to be as good because the designers knew that they couldn't compete with the big boys. Anyway, in the end, I'm not entirely sure I know why the NBA Jam name went to Acclaim. I do think it's because Acclaim actually had a new idea, even though it didn't work in NBA Jam Extreme. Midway's NBA Hangtime is much more fondly remembered, even though I think it's actually pretty weak. And, sadly, the legacy of my favorite basketball game has been tainted by shovelware titles that are borderline unplayable. Well, I'm afraid that's just the way that it goes. In retrospect, though, I really still have a hard time understanding how one of the best video game franchises of all time managed to go out with a whimper like this. You'd think it would be really hard to screw something up this badly. Oh well.